Luke chapter 9, please.
I'll make sure that
All right, starting at, or just verse 51 there. All right, so we left off last time with Paul saying to Agrippa and Festus, I wish you were like me. That was just a, wow, what a statement. What does Agrippa and Festus have? All the power, tons of wealth, tons of prestige, and Paul, the prisoner, says, I wish you were like me. I just find that fascinating. Because most of us would say, what do we live life for? To get what? All the things that Agrippa and Festus have. Okay? And so Paul, like, no. The problem with you guys is you're still in chains. Yeah, I'm the prisoner here, but you're the one still in chains. You're in the chains of sin in your life. I wish you guys were like me. I'm the one who is actually free. And so Paul's focus on what life is all about, very, very interesting there. So Luke chapter 9, verse 51, as the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. The ESV says, anybody have the ESV in here? The ESV says Jesus set his face toward Jerusalem. What in the world does that mean? What is that language trying to get us to understand? He's focused, okay, on what his true mission, his true purpose in life is. To go to Jerusalem to do what? To go to the cross. Okay? In the Old Testament, Isaiah and Ezekiel use that kind of same language as well. God gives them a mission. How pleasant were their missions a lot of times? Not very. Okay? But it uses that language of set your face toward whatever God is telling you to do. And it's kind of this, get your game face on. All right? This is going to be difficult, but you've got to be committed and focused on what you need to do. All right? Let's go to Acts chapter 11 then. Acts chapter 1. Acts chapter 1. Got to do that first. Acts chapter 1. So Jesus had his mission, and he set his face on that. And so in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, you guys are familiar with this verse. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses. Where? In Jerusalem, in all Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Where is our face supposed to be set? Not here, but out there. Okay? And what's out there? Other people. They're the worst. Right? Hey, people. I got to go deal with the world. What would a lot of us like to do? Anything but that. Right? Okay? We got to set our face on the mission Christ gave his disciples. Go out into the world. All right? So let's go to Acts chapter 11 now. Find a job that you don't have to deal with people. Or computers. That ain't happening. Acts chapter 11, verse 19 through 21. Now those who had been scattered by the persecution in connection with Stephen, okay, you guys know Stephen, traveled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch, telling the message only to Jews. Some of them, however, men of Cyprus and Cyrene, went to Antioch and began to speak to Greeks, non-Jews, also telling them the good news about the Lord Jesus. The Lord's hand was with them, and a great number of people believed. And what did they do? They turned to Jesus. Okay? Jesus turns to the cross, faces the cross. We then are to turn to the world so that the world can what? Turn to Jesus. Didn't we sing a song today? Is that one of our hymns?
Turn your eyes upon Jesus.
Yeah, I think we sang that today. Yeah. Okay. So what's Paul's mission now? His whole 2 years in Caesarea done. Now what does he have to face? What does he have to turn toward? He's got to turn toward Rome. Is it going to be a pleasant challenge for him? No, this is going to be a really, really difficult thing he's going to have to deal with. But he stays focused on where God sends him. Okay? So, journeys in the Bible. Give me some feedback. What are some famous journeys in the Bible?
The one that Mary and Joseph took.
Mary and Joseph from Nazareth to Bethlehem. It's a common journey because Jews from Galilee wanted to go to Jerusalem often, but she's pregnant, and just traveling back then was difficult.
A lot of storms.
Yeah.
Moses.
Going from Egypt to Midian, back to Egypt, then with the Israelites through the Red Sea, 40 years. A lot of journeying, a lot of traveling for Moses.
Joseph.
Abram, from Ur all the way up to, so Ur right in here, all the way up to Haran, all the way over to Canaan, long travel.
Joseph and his brothers.
And his brothers, they had to go all the way from their land, which was in famine, all the way to Egypt.
Ruth.
Ruth.
They left the land of Israel and went to Moab.
To Moab,
Naomi did.
which would be south here. Jonah had to travel all the way to Nineveh, way up here.
A small trail, but for the women to come to Jesus' burial plot to morning, it was a small travel.
And then go back and report what they saw, and nobody believed them. What is traveling like in ancient times?
Dangerous.
Extremely. In fact, how would people travel? Caravans. You didn't travel alone. Okay. Remember when Mary and Joseph, Jesus is 12. Well, at least Mary, we know for sure. In a caravan, lost track of Jesus. He stayed back in Jerusalem. He traveled in packs and caravans. Rome made it a little bit more safe. What did Rome do to make it a little more safe to travel? Yeah, the roads, and they would have troops every now and then on those roads, so it was a little more safe. But didn't Jesus tell a parable about the not safe journeys, travels on these roads? The road from Jerusalem to Jericho, it was tough. What about sea travel? What was that like?
A lot of shipwrecks.
A lot of them. And the Romans made it a little more safe just because they dealt with pirates, okay? Because they wanted what kind of travel to be safe? All of the cargo ships, and we're going to be talking about that. Apparently, North Africa, especially Egypt, supplied Rome with a lot of materials, okay? And so they needed to make sure all of this was safe to journey, but it was still extremely dangerous. Not more dangerous than today.
And you didn't plan on coming home.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, travel was either because you were changing
Yeah, it
residence
had to
or
be a big deal while you were traveling.
Right.
You just didn't get in the car
didn't
and
go
just
visit
go for a weekend,
yeah.
something like that. So going to Jerusalem, yeah, that was a big deal. So people would do that often. And going other places, boy, because again, if you went into the wrong area or anything like that, bad things were going to happen. So I was thinking about our journeys, our travels, our trips over the years. Abby and I with the kids. I'm going to tell 2 stories, but you guys share any good stories that you've got. I know you've got some. When we were living in Illinois, our first car was a Ford Taurus, which I thought was fancy until I went into the high school parking lot and saw all the other kids' cars, and it wasn't fancy. But we were hauling from Illinois, southern Illinois, near St. Louis, to Cleveland. We were hauling our pop-up camper, a 1972 Starcraft. You guys know how heavy those things are?
Yes.
Extremely. So my Taurus wasn't doing well, and we got to the campground outside of Cleveland. They used to have a SeaWorld there with an amusement park next to it, and so we get into the campground, and it's just billowing smoke out of my car at that point. And so I quick run into the ranger's place to get my little ticket to get to, wherever I'm parking, run back into the car, and we get to the place to park. And thank goodness it was just a drive in the front way to park the camper. I didn't have to back it in on this one. And the car just, boom, dead right there. So what do you do with a wife and 2 little kids in a foreign place with your car just dead? We bought a new car. What was that, a Ford?
It was the Windstar, the racing van.
Yeah, I was not ready in my life yet to get a minivan. I didn't like the stigma that went with that. So I got one that had stripes on it, and I said, this is a racing van, not a minivan. And then the other one that I was thinking of was we were living in Milwaukee, and my niece was getting married in Pittsburgh in the summer, and I was working the day, and so we were going to leave at night, stop in South Bend overnight, and then get there in plenty of time. We get to South Bend, and our neighbor calls us and says, I don't know.
It was that really bad rainstorm that flooded all this because they were watching our house.
Yeah.
They had the key.
Anyway, they contacted us, and you might want to come back home, check your house. Everybody's basement is flooding. Well, our basement never floods. But okay, we'll come back home, and sure enough, there was a few inches of water in the basement. And I don't know if you've ever had to clean out your basement from water damage. That was not a fun day.
We worked all night.
all day, all night, because we had some carpet and
drywall,
and the drywall we had to cut. And anyway, so we got to get to this wedding. So we drive all the way to Pittsburgh. They ain't even been to Pittsburgh. You've driven downtown Pittsburgh?
It's horrendous.
So the church was downtown, and the parking garage, we get to the parking garage, but I've got the carry-on thing on top of the van. So that wasn't going to happen. Plan B, so we're circling around trying to, have you ever tried to circle around in Pittsburgh? Don't ever circle around. It's not like here in Milwaukee. If you get on the wrong road, okay, you're not circling anywhere. You're going to West Virginia or something like that. Okay, so we finally found a parking spot, and the kids were little, and somebody had a diaper that was not kosher. And we're changing our clothes because we're going to a wedding in the parking lot. And then we run all the way, and we get there just when my brother-in-law was taking my niece up to the front, and we sit in the back. It was just woo. So those are two of our stories. I'm sure I got a lot more.
We've got a lot.
Traveling, stuff happens. Anybody got a good story for us?
I got, when you told
Does this
about
involve
Mary.
the FBI again?
No, this is not involving FBI. But when you know those nursery rhyme about the old woman who lives in the shoe, she has so many children, she doesn't know what to do? Well, that could have been my mantra, because we were camping and we have 5 kids and we said everybody could bring a friend. So we had 10 kids. And somehow we left my little 4-year-old Lisa behind. We left her. And we didn't know she was missing because we had so many kids, you know.
So this is the Jesus at the temple story.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I so relate to that. And my daughter Lori, who was the oldest child, she was feeling some guilt too, because she thought maybe she was supposed to be in charge of Lisa, but the culprit was Lenny. He was in charge of Lisa, and he didn't do what he was supposed to.
Who was in charge of Lenny? Squiggy.
No one was in charge of Lenny. So it's terror, it's extreme guilt, it's you're going to do something to change your life if you get that little Tootsie back and everything. So when we discovered she was missing, we were a half hour out. We had to turn back for a half hour. We went back to the campground, and the campground has a pond where you can swim, and Bill was thinking, oh my gosh, she's drowned, or something like that. No cell phones. This is before cell phones. So anyway, when we came back, they had her propped up in the bar with potato chips and soda, which I never gave my kids, and everything like that. And she'll have none of it. She is crying her eyes out.
Oh, okay. I thought she was having a great time at the bar.
No,
Didn't notice that she was
if that had
missing.
been Lenny, he would have been having a good time. But this is Lisa. This is our little Lisa.
Oh,
So I understand the terror, but that, was a good reminder of, having kids is a big responsibility.
And we're going to be talking about that today, where Paul doesn't want to lose anybody on this journey. So that really plays into that really well. Let's go to James chapter 1 real quick. I want to look at 2 more Bible verses, because this idea of sea travel was terrifying to people. I remember doing way back in my schooling days, a report on why people did not travel far away from the coast when you went by sea. Because what did people think was out there in the ocean? Monsters and whirlpools and all sorts of evil out there that was going to get them. And so the writers of the Bible often use that type of language to help us understand our faith life a lot of times. So James chapter 1 verse 6. By the way, are we still terrified of the ocean today? I think so. Do you remember when the movie Jaws came out? People didn't go into the water because of that movie. Just that image, all right, terrified people. So James chapter 1 verse 6. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. This image of life being a journey, especially a journey on the ocean, is really, really a struggle for a lot of people. Isaiah chapter 57 verse 20. Let's go to that. Isaiah 57 verse 20, but the wicked are like the tossing sea which cannot rest, whose waves cast up mire and mud. Okay, so if life is a journey and we're supposed to go out into that world and do God's ministry, what should we expect sometimes? Troubles, difficulties, things that are even terrifying. What would most of us want to do? Stay home, protect me, it's all about me, that type of thing. Okay? But we've got to have the mindset of Christ. Look toward what God wants you to do. Okay? So we're going to now, let's go to Acts 27. Now we're going to go through Paul's journey from Caesarea all the way to Rome. I'm just going to simply read. Here's the problem, though. I don't know anything about sailing. So when we come upon some terms, I wrote down some things to help to find what these words are. But if you've got questions about sailing, we've got a resident who can help us. Correct? All right, so let's start at verse 1. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion. Again, a centurion is a Roman officer in charge of 100 troops, named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. So this guy is pretty impressive. We boarded a ship from Adramyttium and to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia, and we put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. Again, Luke is so impressive with his details, isn't he? Okay? So again, if people, oh, this is a bunch of garbage, I don't believe any of this, they've got people they can go to confirm what Luke is saying is true. Verse 3, the next day we landed at Sidon. So Sidon is just a little bit north of Caesarea. And Julius, in kindness to Paul, that's going to play important in this story, allowed him to go to his friends so that they might provide for his needs. From there we put out to sea and again passed to the lee of Cyprus. What is the lee of an island?
The sheltered side.
Shelter. Yeah, that's what I got. It's in my Bible, shelter.
Yeah, it's the side, yeah, that's not going to have as much wind, or the wind is going to be a little more friendly. Okay, so they're going to go on this side. Those of you who can see my cool map, this side of Cyprus. Okay, all right. Passed to the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. When we had sailed across the open sea. Okay, so when it says open sea, what is that implying? This is where it gets dangerous, okay? Off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. So now they have traveled up to here. So nothing bad has happened, okay? The travel's been pretty safe at this point. All right, we're at verse 6. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy. Where's Alexandria? Down in Egypt. So this is a grain cargo ship now that they've taken and put all their passengers on. Verse 7. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving off Cnidus. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee of Crete. So they're traveling straight south this way. Okay? So now they're going toward Crete, opposite Salomone. We moved along the coast with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens near the town of Lasea. So Fair Havens is on the southern part of Crete. Much time had been lost. That's kind of important right there. When a cargo ship is losing time, who's getting upset? The captain and the people who've invested in all this and the people in Rome waiting for all this. Okay, just think of our own kind of problems we've got on our ports today. Not a lot of people are happy right now, right? Dangerous because by now it was after the fast. What does that mean? What is the fast? That is the Day of Atonement. That's the day of Yom Kippur. For Jewish people, technically, you only had to fast once a year. It was that day, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. What is that day, the Day of Atonement? The high priest goes into the holiest area of the temple and makes a sacrifice for everybody, all God's people, all Israel. Okay, so that was a day of fasting. Okay, when is Yom Kippur? Anybody know? Yeah, it's October. Sometimes it'll early November, but usually in that October time. So it's fall. Okay.
The week before the New Year.
Yeah. So it's sometime in the fall. Okay. Well, here's the thing. So I had to look all this up. I don't know anything about traveling. Fall time, this time of year right now in the Mediterranean, very risky. Okay, you're pretty hesitant to go out, especially in the open sea. All right, it's in the winter that it becomes 10 times worse. All right, so they got to either travel now when it's risky or wait till winter's over and then try again in March. But again, it's a cargo ship. Do they want to wait? Okay, so this becomes a real big problem for them. All right, so Paul warned them. Verse 10, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bringing great loss to the ship and cargo and to our own lives also. Why does Paul say that? What did we learn, 5 weeks ago? How many times has Paul been shipwrecked? It's already been shipwrecked 3 times already. He knows how dangerous all of this is. You don't travel this time of year. So Paul was trying to give advice. All right, but again, he's a prisoner. Who's going to listen to him? Verse 11. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot, the captain, and of the owner of the ship, the guy who needs to get this cargo to Rome as fast as he can. Verse 12. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete facing both southwest and northwest. So they tried to go from Fair Havens on this southern, southeast part of Crete and try to get all the way to the other side of Crete. Okay? By the way, harboring a ship, sometimes dangerous, right? Depending on the harbor, I guess, but apparently Fair Havens, not a great port.
I would think that it's more protected than on the other side.
Okay. So they should have stayed like Paul. Now they're going to try to get across there, and it's going to be dangerous. All right. So this was a harbor in Crete, okay, facing both southwest and northwest. All right, verse 13 then. When a gentle south wind, oh, isn't that nice, began to blow, they thought they had obtained what they wanted. So they weighed anchor. What does that mean? What does weighed anchor?
They pulled it up.
They pulled it up, lifted the anchor, and sailed along the shore of Crete. Okay, so they're going along there. Verse 14, before very long, a wind of hurricane force. I don't think Luke is exaggerating here. I lived in Houston, Texas for 8 years, and I had to go through 4 tropical storms. The difference between a tropical storm and a hurricane, the rain is just unbelievable. Just think of the biggest thunderstorm you've ever been in, and it just goes on and on for 12, 20 hours. But it doesn't have quite the wind. Okay, so hurricane winds, that is very, very scary stuff. Called the northeaster. All right, so I had to look that up. The northeaster, does it come from that direction or is it going in that direction? Comes from that direction. Okay, so northeast so it's coming this way, so it's blowing them that way.
We get that once in a while, and it's really bad.
Yeah, because it's coming off the lake, and we don't like that.
You're right.
We don't want that. Okay? Swept down from the island. So verse 15, the ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. What does that kind of sound like? They're our sermon series. This is out of control. They've got no control of the boat at this point. Oh, I'm sorry. Verse 16. As we passed to the lee, okay, so the safer side of a small island called Cauda. So I put a little dot right there. There's a small island just south of Crete. We were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. When the men had hoisted means what? Lifted up. It abroad, they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. I looked up that term. That's called undergirding. Is that right? They're worried what's going to happen to the ship in these waves and wind and all this. It's just going to tear apart. So apparently they put ropes under the ship and try to hold it all together, okay? Like a Christmas package or something like that, holding it all together. Fearing that they would run aground on the sandbars of the Syrtis. Did I skip? Yeah. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. So they lower the sea anchor to what? So that they're not too floppy all over the place. I think I looked up broaching. What does the word broaching mean?
Kind of like having the wind tip you over.
Yeah. Okay. So the you're heeling one way or another too far. So the anchor is going to try to prevent that from happening. Okay, they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. Verse 18, we took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. So that's how desperate they are. Okay. Verse 19, on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle. What's tackle?
All the stuff you need to sail with.
Yeah, all your equipment, all your gear.
That seems foolish.
Yeah, I mean, that's how desperate they are at this point. With their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, that presents a huge problem. And the storm continued raging. We finally gave up all hope of being saved. Now, who's speaking here again? Who's the we? That's including Luke, the author here. That's how bad this is. Okay? Luke, this man of tremendous faith, all right, he's giving up hope in their safe arrival. So verse 21, after the men had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. All right, so is Paul being I told you so and kind of rubbing it in their face? I don't know, but he's at least telling them, don't give up hope. I know what I'm talking about here. Okay, so Paul's trying to encourage them
I think
to
it's
listen
also
to him.
just his perspective is that I kind of have more insight. I mean, just, we know because of the Spirit's teaching him.
Yeah.
But it's like, just remember I said this.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to
Yeah.
say this.
Right.
So please believe
Pay
this.
attention to me. I know what I'm talking about here. Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. Verse 22. But now I urge you to keep up your courage. Excellent. Because not one of you will be lost. Isn't that a bold statement? Only the ship will be destroyed. Isn't that a very bold prediction? So they're probably, how can we be saved but the ship is not? That probably doesn't make sense to a lot of them. Verse 23, last night an angel of God, whose I am, I like that, and whom I serve, I really like that, stood beside me and said, do not be afraid. Isn't that what angels always say? Paul, you must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So what is Paul basically saying? I've been told directly by God, we're going to make it. It's all going to be fine because God needs me, has already told me I'm going to be in Rome. Okay? So incredible words of encouragement. So verse 25. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God. I like that. Okay? So Paul is not getting them to listen to me because I, Paul, am so great. Okay? We're going to focus on God getting us through this. That it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. Okay? This isn't going to be a pleasure cruise from the rest of it. We're going to make it, but on our... Have we ever had a flat tire on some of our trips?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yes.
And I wasn't there?
No, because Emma and I were visiting a museum, and you were at the kids in the hotel.
Oh, that's right. And that was in Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good trip. Remember you guys got flat tires out in the middle of nowhere?
Mm-hmm. I stand across Texas and 60 miles between Midland and Big Spring, and here I am
You
with
talk
two girls.
about out in the middle of nowhere. That's a good example of that. Wow.
I just prayed that nobody would plow into me because cars are whizzing by.
So you're going to make it, but, and it says some island. What does that mean?
Nowhere.
You know what?
Yeah, we're going to run into Gilligan pretty soon here. Right? So it's encouraging, but, all right. So, all right, verse 27 then. On the 14th night, holy cow, are you kidding me? 2 weeks of this? Karen, 2 weeks of camping with all those kids?
I've never tried that.
Please don't.
How long would the trip generally take?
I don't know. And did you look up how far this is?
It is, but not by travel. It's 4,000 kilometers, which in today's world you can do it in 41 hours on an interstate. However, 4,000 kilometers would take you to travel by land to go from.
Oh, and that's
by land.
Yeah, that's all. So
Yeah.
so straight across
It's a
or
shortcut.
by how the crow flies.
Oh, 3,000 miles.
Yeah, so I really don't know how long that journey would normally take. I have no idea. But you're basically adrift for 2 weeks. Okay? That is, you talk about a test for people. And Paul, encouragement the whole way. I can't even stand in my car. You know how you got the kids in the car and you're in an 8-hour drive. The Amlings are thinking right now, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's the last half hour that they start to scream, and that's the time where we're not stopping. And so we just push through to the end. 2 weeks. All right, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea. I had to look that up. Because the Adriatic Sea is up there. But they're not up there. So apparently on ancient maps, the Adriatic Sea was anything south of Italy. Okay, so Luke is accurate there. You know that. When about midnight, the sailors sensed they were approaching land. How do they know they're approaching land?
Birds.
You could hear animals like birds.
It's a different sound to the water.
Yeah, the waves crashing up onto the shore, okay? They took soundings. All right, I had to look this up. What's a sounding?
They check the depth of the water.
Yeah, so I had to look up how they did that. You know how they did that way back
Throwing
then?
a weighted rope.
Yeah, weighted.
Yeah. That's what Mark Twain did. That's
Some
what
no.
Mark Twain did.
Yes,
Yes.
that's what Twain means.
Yeah.
I learned that from history teacher, Mr.
Coke?
No,
Down.
no, here, Mr. Cross Country
Schaefer.
runner. Mr. Schaefer taught me that. Learned what twain means, because he was doing that on the boat when he was traveling.
I learned that when I was in grade school.
See, Mr. Schlie, you should have paid attention in class.
You hear that all up and down the Mississippi. Mark Twain, Mark Twain. That was a call.
Yeah.
That's how he picked his name. You learned that in English class.
I should have paid attention. All right, they took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. Oh, they don't see, my ESV said fathoms. How much is a fathom?
6 feet.
6 feet. Wow. So much I don't know. Okay. So we were discussing what's a league then?
Bunch of fathoms.
The fathom is the depth and the league is the length.
No. 20,000 leagues under.
So Mr. Schaefer was wrong on that because we were debating that. So a league is many fathoms.
That's my guess.
100 fathoms or 1,000?
Hey, Steve.
1,000
What does
fathoms.
Google say?
Yeah. Sorry. What was the question?
Looking up the college football scores. No.
No, I was showing him 50 miles west along the south coast to reach Phoenix. So,
Oh, okay.
Acts 27:13.
Okay. So it's a long ways. Okay. All right.
Is 3 statute miles.
A league is 3 miles. Okay.
What's a statute?
Stand still. No.
Same as ours?
Statute.
Standard,
Statute mile as opposed to a nautical mile.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. I was told by my stage director to speed up. All right. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. All right. So we are getting close to something. Fearing that they would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern. What's the stern? The back of the boat. And prayed for daylight. Now, that's interesting. Who's praying and who are they praying to? I think they're all praying, right? But probably not all praying to the same thing. All right? But there's a lot of praying going on. So that's how, and again, these are a lot of experienced sailors, soldiers who probably experienced a lot of, this shows you how difficult this is. This is pretty terrifying. Verse 30, in an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea. That's how panicky the sailors were. Okay, we need to get out of here. Pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. What's the bow? It's the front of the boat. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved. So Paul taking charge. Okay, listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. This isn't working out for any of us if these sailors get off the ship. So the soldiers cut the ropes that the lifeboat and held the lifeboat and let it fall away. Verse 33. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. For the last 14 days, he said, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. I can't imagine that. You haven't eaten anything. I don't think they're exaggerating. That is just remarkable. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head. Isn't that amazing what Paul's saying to them? That is tremendous. They're all panicky, right? But Paul's the one who seems to be under control. Verse 35, and after he said this, he took some bread and gave, isn't this beautiful, and gave thanks to God in front of all of them. Everybody's, you can imagine, panicking, chaos. The sailors are like, let's get out of here. Paul, the calm one. Let's take a moment here. Okay? We're going to thank God for this. Most people would not be thanking God for what they're going through at that point. Then he broke it and began to eat. Verse 36. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. So it sounds like they're all calming down because of Paul. Verse 37. Altogether there were 276 of them on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. Okay, so again, you're getting closer to shore. The depth is getting shallower. What do they need the boat to do? Rise up a little bit more. Okay. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Why would they tie the rudders?
I think maybe it was with the strong winds, they wanted to keep things at a certain course.
Okay.
When the rudder's tied, you have no control. Now, when you remove,
Now they need to
they need some
through the rocks and whatever. Okay. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. They're sinking. This is disaster right now. Verse 42, the soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. Why would they do that? It's back to chaos again. And what do you start thinking about in chaos? Yourself. What's the guards' jobs? Keep the prisoners. If this is chaos, we can't report that we lost the prisoners. So let's kill them. So you start thinking about yourself again. The sailors thinking about themselves. Now these guards thinking about themselves. Verse 43, but the Centurion wanted to spare Paul's life. Isn't that interesting? He liked Paul and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. I'm thinking the sailors probably know how to swim.
They don't.
Not necessarily.
A lot of them don't know how to swim.
Why would you think?
A lot of them, it wasn't their choice to be a sailor.
That's probably true.
Right.
That's okay. Okay. He ordered those who could swim. Verse 44, the rest were to get there on planks or on pieces of the ship in this way. Everyone reached land in safety. Isn't that amazing? Wow. How many different ways could they have died? Either by nature or by each other. And they all made it because God said that's what's going to happen. We all made it safely to the campsite or wherever we were traveling.
And how many again?
276. That's amazing. Okay. All right. So they got all the way to Malta. Okay. They got all the way to Malta. Once safely on shore, chapter 28 now, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness, and I had to look up this. A bunch of these islanders are from the region of Phoenicia, which is this part of the world, okay? So for whatever reason, over time, Phoenicians, who I guess are good sailors, I guess that's their history, settled in Malta. Showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper, snake, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. So I asked Mr. Ellenberger, our local biologist, what in the world's going on there? Well, it's obviously what? Venomous, and so what does it do? It fastens on, and it's trying to inject its venom into the victim. The thing that threw me off was I didn't know snakes went after things that were much bigger than them. But apparently,
They're threatened.
but yeah, so whatever the reason, Paul's got a snake attached to him. All right, verse 4. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer." What in the world's going on there? Okay.
They're very superstitious.
Extremely. And the fact that he survived this whole thing, but now he deserves it somehow. Okay, that's the thinking. He deserves this somehow. So he must have done something horrible to deserve this kind of death. For though he escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live. But Paul shook the snake off. Luke gives a lot of details. I'm thinking there's more to it than that, but maybe that's just me who would be freaking out that a snake was attached to me. But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall over dead, but after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he's a god. That's how ancient people, that's how polytheistic people often think. Verse 7, there was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home and for 3 days entertained us hospitably. His father was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. What's dysentery?
You don't want to know.
I don't want to know.
I've
heard it's basically aggressive diarrhea. Which is all too common in many countries. The water supply and all that. Paul went in to see him, and after prayer, placed his hands on him and healed him. This sounds familiar from other miracles that Paul and other Old Testament prophets did. When this happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. So, words got out, right? Kind of like with Jesus, right? You start bringing all your sick to the miracle guy. They honored us in many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies we needed. Verse 11. After 3 months, we put out to sea in a ship. So they're on Malta for 3 months. All right, so I had to look up Malta. Today, what religion is the dominant religion of Malta? It's still Christianity. It's very Catholic there. And who do they name most of their kids? Or most of their sons? Paul, okay? And you've got memorials to Paul all over the place in Malta. Know that. After 3 months, we put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. All right, so they finally got smart, right? We're not going out there anymore until it's March. It was an Alexandrian ship, okay, so pretty much like the one they had before, with the figurehead of the twin gods, Castor and Pollux. I had to look that up. Those are the sons of Zeus, and they are the gods of sailors. So isn't that ironic? We put in at Syracuse and stayed there 3 days. From there, we set sail and arrived in Rhegium. The next day, the south wind came up, and on the following day, we reached Puteoli, however you want to pronounce that. So we're getting close to Rome now. Okay, so they came to the toe of Rome, and now they're making their way up the coast there, and they're getting closer, going up Italy, getting closer to Rome. There we found some brothers. What does that mean in biblical language? Brothers. Fellow Christians, okay? Male, female, doesn't matter. Fellow Christians who invited us to spend a week with them. And so and I like that. And so we went to Rome. Interesting. So we're going to stop there. So that's his journey. That's his travel. Isn't it amazing?
Exciting.
We should make, I said, we got to make a movie out of this.
Yes.
The trial, that's part 1. And then the travel to Rome.
I think a lot
Part
of
2.
movies have been made using biblical
they use.
inspiration, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
don't you recognize a
Right.
lot of, like in literature, a lot of stories that are really connected up where they get, but then they always goof it up.
So I'm gonna continue to be someone who doesn't travel on the ocean. I have no desire to do that. All right. Any comments or questions before we pray?
Coming up on the anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald,
Really?
Yes, that's
When
right.
was that?
November
November 10th,
1978?
75.
Yeah. Yeah. And he doesn't do it through violence or any kind of manipulation. He just, in the panic of the situation, he stays calm.
Yeah, the other thing too, he's obviously developed a relationship with the Centurion.
Yeah, Julius.
He's like letting him go and leave,
Right.
and then he doesn't want to kill him.
Right. There's nothing wrong with this Paul. There's nothing sinister about this Paul. I can trust the guy. Right.
But Paul can stay calm because of God.
He knows.
He's seen God's hand in his life in the past, and he knows God's gotten me through these other things.
Yeah.
I'll get through this. So there's a trust there that, you know.
That an adult should have,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the teenager in the back of the car saying, "Oh my gosh, is
Mm-hmm.
Dad going to get us there alive
Mm-hmm.
or not?"
But I just think that he's got that faith and trust that comes from God.
Yeah.
It's not his own calm.
Yeah.
It's supernatural in that way.
This issue in our trip is no big deal, kids. Dad has gone through
Mm-hmm.
much worse than this. Yeah.
I love that he reminds them to eat.
Yeah.
And I forget whether it's Elijah or Elisha in the Old Testament, but one of them is basically like talking to God. He's angry. He's saying, "I just want to die," and God basically says, "Get a snack,
Calm her down. Yeah.
and then we'll go through this." Like very aware of us in our frailties and forms that we need those basic needs met, and then, all right, God use us. He will get us through.
Oh, and I looked that up. What kind of bread would survive out on the water like that?
Not good bread.
So that's what I think. It's kind of like Civil War studies, the hardtack. Something to that. You know, not very pleasant, but it at least nourishes you. Again. All right, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for being with us in our journey in life. Help us to walk with you and not the ways of this world. Help us to look to you and not the things of this world. And as we come up on difficult times, help us to deal with it in a way that is faithful. So we thank you for your encouragement. In your name we pray. Amen.